Hey, welcome back. After going through this video, you will be able to understand the code and logic behind the property list page of PG Life web applications. By now, you have understood and coded most of the code of the PG Life web application. But before we proceed any further, let us discuss the code of the remaining web pages, that is, property list and property detail. We will start with the code of the property list web page. Here at the start, we have a few linked CSS files which we have already discussed earlier in this training. Then we have a custom CSS file for this web page. Next, we have the code for the same header for this web page. We could have kept the code of the header file in the common.css file, but that requires the understanding of PHP. So, we will keep the code in separate CSS files for now. Then we have the code for the breadcrumbs. If you look on the top left side of the web page, this is the breadcrumb. Next, I have taken this entire page as a page container. Then, we have this code for the filters present in this row. This code has three parts, one for the filter part and the remaining two for sorting part. We will add the functionalities to these filters later as we progress along in this training. But note that clicking on these icons opens a modal for which the code is present at the bottom of our code. Now in our web page, here comes the core part where we have cards of various properties. This is the code for the first card. Let us further understand this code using the inspect element. Here I have divided the property card into two containers, image container and property container. A few things might differ for you as Bootstrap 5 is there and you might be using that one, but understand that the logic will remain the same. I would advise you to thoroughly go through the CSS of this property card using inspect element. In our code, you can see a class fa-star. This is basically the font awesome which we have used in our CSS. So FAS is for full star and FA star half is for half star. Similarly, we have the code for the remaining property cards. After this, we have the modal code for the three filters. I have copied the modal code as such from the Bootstrap and have customized it as per our requirement. And at the end, we have the footer code. This is again something we have already discussed. Well, that was all about the code of the property list page. Again, I will say that most of the styling part is taken from the Bootstrap website and we have customized it as per our convenience. So, please take your time to understand the code and always ensure to check and understand the code using the inspect element. In the next video, we will look at the code of the property detail page. Hey, welcome back. After going through this video, you will be able to understand the code and logic behind the property detail page of the PG Life web application. This is one of the property details page. Let us understand its corresponding code. Again, at the top, we have the CSS files and custom CSS file for this web page. Then, we have the header code, which is the same as we have discussed in index.html and property list page. Next, we have the breadcrumbs here at the top left corner of the web page. Although, here the breadcrumb structure is different to what we have seen in the property list page, the code is similar to what we have discussed earlier and is taken as such from the Bootstrap. The next interesting thing is the carousel. These moving images are called carousels. In our web page, the first section is this carousel. Again, this code is taken as such from the Bootstrap website. We have made some changes such as images have been added. For the previous and next arrow in the carousel, we have this code here. Next, in our web page, we have this section. This section is for property summary. It contains three rows. The first row contains the stars and the interested part. The second and third row contains the details of the property. You can check the code and it's quite simple to understand. Let us scroll our code a bit. Here we have the code for the amenities section of the web page. You can see in the web page we have listed the main amenities in a good looking way. This contains a page container so that there is a padding. Then we have h1 tag for the heading. Then we have 4 columns with property MD auto. This is because I want them to take the entire row. Now, for each amenity listed, we have used an image which you can find in the images folder. Let us move to the next part of the web page, that is about the property. This is again quite simple. We have h1 tag and then a p tag in which we have entered all the content about the property. Then we have the property rating code. It contains a page container, it has a h1 tag and then a row part. The row has 2 parts, left side and right side. The left side has a class called MD6 and the right side has class called MD4. Class called MD6 has again 3 rows for each of the criteria and each of the criteria has the star thing. So you can see that the same thing is being repeated again and again in all the pages. Now on the right side we have the rating circle. It contains 2 parts, one for the rating and the other for the star part. Now, let us proceed to the testimonials part of the web page. Let us have a look at its corresponding code. Again, the code is simple. We have testimonial blocks for each testimonial. The testimonial block contains 3 parts. One is the top part for the image. This image you can find in the images folder. The second part is for the text and the third part is for the name. Similarly, you can explore the remaining code for the remaining testimonials. Just ensure that you go through all the code using the inspect element and understand how we have used each property. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Hope you had fun. Bye bye. See you in the next video. In this video, we will set up the DBMS for our PG Live web application. Although the SQL queries to set up the database was already provided to you as a solution to the Module 4 assignment, but in case you have missed it or were unable to execute those, you can see them in action in this video. To set up a database, you need to first identify the entities. These entities were already provided to you in the Getting Started section of the problem statement. The next step was to check if there is any relationship between these entities. This is a very crucial step as it will help you to add foreign keys at appropriate tables. Now, the next step was to identify the relationship between the entities. So, the relationships identified were for users properties as many to many, user testimonials one to many, cities properties one to many, properties amenities many to many, and properties testimonials one to many. Based on the relationships, the next task was to add the foreign keys. Now, as you know, for many to many database relationships, you have to create an intermediate table, which we have done in our case. So let us proceed and understand the SQL queries to create these tables. First, you need to open your MySQL client. Then, you need to create the database first. For this, enter create table PG Live SQL query. You can see the database is successfully created. Next, to create tables inside this database, you need to select it first. For this, I will simply click on this database and here at the top corner you will see the name. This means this database is selected. Now the first table you need to create is the users table, and for this you will enter this query. Here you can see that the ID is set to auto increment. For email, password, name and college name, we have specified the length of the data type as 100. We have specified the varchar as 20 because we know that the mobile number is not going to be more than 10 digits. Still we have defined enough length. For the gender attribute, we have enum data type. Lastly, we have made the IDs as the primary key of this table. Next, we need to create the cities table. Here, if you notice, I have not executed the previous SQL query. First, I will enter all the SQL queries and will execute them at once. So, let me first enter the SQL query. This is a fairly simple one. The ID attribute is set to auto increment. Then we have the name attribute with varchar 100. And lastly, the ID attribute is assigned as the primary key of this table. Next, we will create the properties table for which you need to enter this query. Now here, if you look at the attributes which you hard-coded earlier, we are directly storing them in the database. This is a convenient way to fetch the properties. Few things to notice here. First, this long text data type. This allows us to enter the long texts. Next, we have identified the float value as 2, 1 for ratings. Can you guess why? This is because the total rating is 5 and one can give the rating as 4.2, 3.5, etc. etc. So 2 makes the total digits as 2 and 1 as 1 digit after the decimal point. Also, here we have the city underscore ID as the foreign key which is referencing the ID of the cities table. This is the reason the cities table is created before the properties table. Similarly, we have the queries for the remaining tables and for the intermediate tables. You can copy and paste all the queries as such that are given in the solution of assignment 4. Click Go to execute all the queries. There you go. All the tables are created inside the PG Life database. Now, the next step is to add the data inside these tables. This again was given to you as dummydata.sql. So, open this file like this. Copy all the queries and execute them in the MySQL client. This will add the data. So, this is how you can create the database design for the PG Life web application. Hope you enjoyed watching this video. Up next is a quiz. Hi, welcome to the next topic of this module. If you remember, in the assignment of module 6, that is JavaScript, you worked on an assignment where you were asked to use Ajax and its related login_submit.php file. In this video, you need to implement Ajax and JavaScript in the remaining pages of PG Life web application. So let us quickly see what you need to do. Here in the property list page, you can see a heart icon which on click makes the property as interested. Well, you need to use Ajax to make this toggle work, which on click will make the property as interested, and clicking on it again will again mark the property as not interested. But note that this toggle will only work if you are logged in. Let me log out first. Now if I click on the heart icon, it will open the login modal, means you will only be able to mark a property as interested if you are logged in. We have the same feature in the property details page where you can toggle this heart shape icon to mark the property as interested and not interested. But if you go to the dashboard page, there you have only one option to mark the property as not interested. So in all the 3 pages we have the same feature. To help you get started, I will explain and provide the code of one of the pages, and using the similar approach, you need to complete the Ajax part of the remaining pages on your own. Now, if you can see, I have created a separate PHP file named as toggle_interested. Can you guess why I have done this? This is because the feature is similar in all the pages, which is the reason I have created a separate common file. And note that this file is located inside the API folder. Now, to make any property as interested, we need information about the property underscore ID, which will tell us for which property we are dealing with, and the corresponding ID of the user who is marking the property as interested. This means we need property underscore ID and user underscore ID. User underscore ID we can get simply from the login session because this feature will only work if the user is logged in. It is the property underscore ID that we need to pass. Here we are assuming that we are passing the property underscore ID. Here we have this line of code because we want this file to connect to the database. Next, we have the session start because using it will take the user underscore ID. So isEt session means if the person is not logged in, then we are sending it back. This has 2 key value pairs. The first one means that it did not work, and the second key value pair tells us that the user is not logged in. The execution of the code will come outside of this if statement only if the user is logged in. Then in the next line we are storing the user underscore ID. And in the next line we have the property underscore ID, for which we are assuming that we will get it through the get statement. Then we have this SQL query. Here interested underscore users underscore properties, if you remember, is an intermediate table which takes one user ID and one property ID. This means this code snippet must contain a where clause with a user underscore ID and property underscore ID. For example, suppose my user underscore ID is 2 and I have liked a property whose ID is 9. This means that inside the interested underscore users underscore properties table, we will have only one entry with user underscore ID as 2 and property underscore ID as 9. So we are fetching this data to check if the user has already liked the property or not, and this is what the toggle feature is all about. Here we are checking if the entry is present in the database or not. If it is not, we are sending the error message. Next, we have this code in which we have if the number of rows is greater than 0, it means there is an entry inside the table and the property is already liked. So We have to dislike the property, and how we are disliking it? By deleting it from the table. Then we have a general query, an if condition that checks if there is any error and returns an error message. Now while returning it, we are passing two new pieces of information which you can see here. So success true means that it has been successfully toggled, and is interested false means that the property is marked as not interested. This was the case when the property was already liked. What would be the case if the property was not liked? For this, the execution will enter this else condition. Now, what query will go inside this else condition is something you have to figure out on your own. Note that the query is almost similar to what we discussed earlier, and to give you a hint, here you want to insert the data into the insert underscore user underscore properties table. Well, that was all in this video. In the next video, we will continue to work on the JS and Ajax part of the PG Life web application. Hi, welcome back. In the previous video, you created a file toggle underscore interested.php to add or delete data from the database. In this video, we will add it in the different web pages of the web application, that is property underscore detail, property underscore list, and dashboard page. So again, this time I will explain the code for one of the pages and similarly for the remaining pages. You have to write the code on your own. Let us start with the property underscore detail page. In the first line, window.addEventListener means that execute this function when the window is loaded properly. In the next line, we have windows.location.search. What it does is it fetches the property underscore ID from the URL, that is the get parameter from the URL. So search will become this. Then we are passing this search to URL search params. So what it does, it converts this into an object. And then in the next line to this object, we are passing get and we are specifying the property underscore ID, which will return the value of it. This means that get property underscore ID in this case will return the value 3. You don't need to remember these lines. Just understand the logic and you can copy paste them as per the requirement while completing the assignment. Next, we have this document.getElements by class name. Let me show you using the inspect element. You can see that this heart has been given a class name is interested image. Let me show you in the code also. If you remember, when we created this heart, we added a class is interested image. So here we added this only for the JavaScript purpose. The first element denotes the filled heart and the second element denotes the empty heart. So this code in our JavaScript will fetch either this element or this element depending on which condition is true. Next, if you're wondering why we have used 0 here, this is because we want to fetch the first element of the array. Then in the next line, we have added an event listener to this object. And what does this event listener do? It executes this function when the image is clicked. Then we have this code that initiates the JavaScript request. This you already know and we have discussed multiple times. So we won't be going into the details. Now let us discuss the toggle underscore interested underscore success function. First, we are removing the loading part because the page is ready. Then we are checking if the user is logged in or not. If yes, then the code execution will enter, else as a response we are showing the login modal. And this is the code to open the modal. Now let us talk if the case is successful. Here we are doing two things. One, when the user is logged out and the user clicks on the heart icon, it opens a login modal. As soon as the user logs in, the heart fill needs to change. And also the user interested count will also change. Well, with this we have come to the end of this video. So to get started, I have provided the code of property underscore detail which we have discussed in this video. Also, I have provided the code of property underscore list. Please go through the code and understand it line by line. Now as an assignment, code the JavaScript and the Ajax part for the dashboard page. All the best. Hi. Welcome to the next part of the project where you will use the React web technology to create one aspect of the PG Life web application. Let us see what you have to do. This is the property underscore list page which we have coded earlier using PHP and several other technologies. So using React, you have to code the same page. That is, you need to create and use components in order to make this page work. Here you can see these cards which you have to create using React. If you remember, to create a component, we should ideally choose a component that has only one function attached to it. So here, you have these star-shaped ratings, a heart icon that marks the property as interested, this gender icon, filter feature, and much more can all be created as components. Now, when we create a project in React, it is a standalone project which will work independently, and you have already seen in the last topics of the React module. Standalone means that there is no linkage of the files which are created inside using React. So, first things first, create a separate folder React app inside the PG Live folder which you have already created like I have done. You can name this folder anything you want, but since you are using React, so I have named it as React app. Next, you will create components inside the src folder and then you will replace the code of property_list.php with the compiled version of this project folder. Don't worry, you have already done similar things in the topics 8 of module 7 where you created project-test using create react app. Let me quickly show you. So these folders are automatically created using create react app. Ignore the builder folder now as it is created when we will build the project. Inside the src folder, you can see I have created my own components. Don't worry about them at this point. So the code in the app.js has been replaced with our code and I have deleted all the default additional files. So once I have created all the files, I have then built it, for which you can see a folder named build. If I open this folder, you can see a file index.html which contains some minified version of the file which I have copied inside the existing property_list.php file. Also, it has some additional JavaScript files which are present inside the static folder. There are two main JavaScript files inside this folder, this and this. Once the building is done, I copied these JavaScript files and pasted them inside the JS folder, which is inside the PG Live folder. So that it can be accessed from our main application. Now, let us again come to the components that I have created. Here you can see that I have created every possible component like filter bar, filter modal, property cards, stars, and much more. Components you know how to create, but the important question here is how will you fetch the data? You already know that the data is fetched from the database and you use PHP for the same. So here lies the importance of React. React is about moving the PHP out of the front-end code. If you see earlier, we wrote PHP code along with our HTML code. So this way is very complicated and is used only for smaller applications. But when the application grows, the idea is to have the code organized, means we need to write the HTML and PHP in a standalone manner. Now, for cases where we have HTML and PHP in a standalone manner, we use some code to get the data. Let us have a look at the code. This is a JavaScript function, a fetch API. You can copy the code from below the video. It takes one parameter which is a string. This is equivalent to an AJAX request, or you can say an alternate way to do an AJAX request. So what it says, do an AJAX request for this URL which is a PHP based URL. So based on the request, the web server will execute the request and will return it. Now whatever the information is returned, it will be converted into response and then converted into JSON object. This response data is data from the PHP file in the form of key value pairs. Next, the data from the JSON object is again passed to another function and we are using it as data. And for this data, we are basically changing the state. Here we are adding the key value pairs from the response data to the states properties, and then we are replacing this property with the response that comes. Again, I will emphasize, do not worry about the code. Just change the URL here and the states as per your requirement and keep the remaining code as such. Now, there is another function, component did mount, which we have not discussed. Let me quickly show you. Here, after state inside the class component, I have used this function. This function gets called before the UI is rendered. We will only discuss this much about this function in this training. Well, that was all in the video. Up next is an exercise. Hi, welcome back. Now that you have created the React app folder, let us bring the HTML and CSS code to the app.js file. To do this, open the property underscore list.php file which you have already coded earlier. In my case, I have named the file as property underscore list without React. This is because I have already coded the entire project using React in which another property underscore list.php file is present with the React code. So, to avoid any confusion, I have renamed the file for easy understanding. From this file, except the header, footer, and the breadcrumb part, copy everything and paste it inside the app.js folder, which is inside the src folder. So, now your copied code includes the page container and filter modal specific code. Now, paste this copied code inside the return function in the app.js file. Now, once you have pasted the code, pause the video, have a look at the code, and think of different components. So, one component you might have thought of is filter bar. Just think of it as a standalone property. If you do not know what is a filter bar, let me quickly show it to you. This is the filter bar. Now, what I have done is I have written only filter bar here in the app.js and have pasted its code in a separate JavaScript file, filtermodal.js, inside the return function. Let me open this file. So this is almost the same code along with some changes and additions. We will talk about these changes later. The next components you might have thought of are the property card and filter modal. Again, I have written their names in the app.js file and have taken out the code in separate JavaScript files. So based on the understanding, we can have three components in our app.js code. If you notice here, we have the filter modal outside the div element. This is because in our PHP code, the filter modal was outside the page container. Also, we have these HTML tags open and close here and here with the forward slash. This is because we want to include both these div elements inside one element. This is done to prevent the code from throwing an error. So, this is how we take the HTML and CSS out of the property underscore list.php file. There are still a few more things remaining which we will continue to discuss in the next video. See you then. Bye bye. Hi, welcome back. Before we dive into this topic, let us first understand how this standalone project which you have created earlier in this module will work. For this, we will open two files. One file is present inside the public folder named index.html and the other is present inside the src folder named index.js. These files are already provided to you in the previous video. In the index.html file, we have this root element, and in the index.js file, we have this get element by id that renders this root component. Also, in this file, we have the app component in which we have our code. There is another exciting thing. If you notice in the index.html file, we have our CSS files here. Here, we have used the URL 127.0.0.1 and not used the relative URL because the CSS files are not a part of this project. If you look at the folder structure, the CSS files are present outside the React app folder. This means we have to use the absolute URL here for whether it is for the CSS files or the images which are present outside the React app folder. Similarly, if I scroll the code down, you can see that I have changed the URLs of the Bootstrap and jQuery accordingly. Please note that when we will build the project, nothing in the public folder gets built. Only the files present in the src folder get built. You can ignore the folder temp_files. This is for internal purposes only. Now, let us discuss another file utils.js which is inside the src folder. It is a standalone file and as you can see that the name is not capitalized, so it is not a component. Here, if you see we have export constant base path. Export means we want to use it in a different file, and as a base path we have used 127.0.0.1/pglife because that's where we want to fetch the information. Next, this is important, so please pay attention. Once you build the project, comment this line and uncomment this line. The reason we have done this is because when we will include this file after building into the main files that are outside the React app folder, we don't need to write the complete path. We can simply use a dot as we have done here that corresponds to the file path. Now let me quickly show you how to use this path. Let me open the filter bar.js. Here you can see from the utils.js path, I have included the base path variable. Similarly, you can see I have included the base path of image files too. The code might look overwhelming. Please spend some time understanding the code line by line. Next, we will again move to the property card.js file. Here, if you look, we have changed the class to class name as class is a reserved keyword. I have made this change not only in the property card, but also in the filter bar.js file too. Also, remember that wherever you are using images, just use the alt attribute. If you don't do this, React will throw an error. This is a rule which you need to follow and take care of while coding. Another interesting thing to notice here is that I have created different components for stars and interested, as they can be created as a separate entity having only one function. It is always a good practice to break down larger components into small components. Proceeding further, let me open stars.js file and property underscore list PHP file without the React part. Pause the video, have a look at these files. Do you notice something interesting? If you see here, we have the loop that is running 5 times and in the star.js file. I have simply copied the star rating without the PHP code 5 times. And similar things you can see in the property card.js file. Next, we have a no property component where it will simply say that no PG is listed. Please note that we will only focus on property underscore list page as it is more than sufficient for a beginner level student to understand how React works. With this, we have come to the end of the video. Up next is an exercise. Make sure to complete it before proceeding to the next video. Hi. I hope you have completed the assignment which was given to you. Let us quickly go through the code of this file. And for the same, let us see both the files side by side. If you look at the code, they are almost the same. Although there are some additions in the new PHP file which we have created, but rest of the code is similar and taken exactly as it is from our previously written PHP file. If you notice at the end, I'm using the JSON underscore encode function to convert it into JSON object so that it can be used in the JavaScript file. In this file, at the top we have these headers. These headers play an important role as they allow AJAX requests to be made across the website. Seems confusing. Let me explain to you with the help of an example. Suppose we have a cricket website that displays the score. What if someone makes an AJAX request to this website and takes the data to his own website? Now, this is something wrong as the cricket website is losing all its privacy. So, HTTP prevents this cross-origin resource sharing. That is, CORS, which means that the HTTP does not allow any website to make a request to another website. So, to allow us to use AJAX requests from one website to another, we need to use these headers. Now, you might be wondering how come we are making AJAX requests across the websites in our case. Let me show you the folder structure. So, this new PHP file is inside the API folder, which is a separate project, and the other PHP file is inside the React app folder, which is a standalone project. So, we are making an AJAX request to get the data from the API folder to the React app folder, for which we need to include the headers in our code. For ease, you can copy the code from below the video. Now let us proceed to the next segment where we will discuss how to create property cards in our app.js file. Here, if you look, I have converted this entire thing into a class component so that I can add states into it. And below this code, you can see that I have first created a state named properties. Initially, it is a blank array and it will fetch information from this particular PHP file. And then we have this part of the code which we have already discussed earlier in this topic. So what happens here? This component didMount function gets called before the render function. Here, we are making a fetch API call to the PHP file to fetch the information to this base path 127.0.0.1/pglife. And then using the get request, we are passing the city name like Mumbai, Delhi, etc. And from where will we get this city name? For this, we have written these 3 lines of code which fetch the URL. There are some JavaScript functions that are not specific to React, so don't worry about them. Next, we will move to the render function. Here, what we are basically doing is duplicating the array. In this, we are using a map function which will run as many times depending upon the number of properties in a city. For example, if Delhi has 3 listed properties, then the map function will run 3 times and each time it will return a JSX. Note that here we are storing the JSX in property underscore cards variable name, and later we are printing this. Next, let us move to the property card.js file. Here, we also made some additions. If you look, most of the things we have already done in the PHP, that is the interested user count, so we have passed it here. Since properties is inside props, that is why we have written props.property to get the property object. If the user is logged in, it will return true, else false. And also, we are getting information on how many users have liked the property. Similarly, we are printing the name and address using the props. So let's come to gender. Here, we have first defined the base part to get the images from the main project. We are storing the JSX in a variable gender underscore image, and then we are using this gender underscore image as a JSX expression here. Next, we have rent. Here, we are using the number format for rupees, which is comma separated. Well, this code might seem overwhelming to you as a lot of things are new. Please don't worry. The idea is to help you understand how we can code the same website using React. This is the reason most of the code is and will be provided to you so that you can run, execute and debug it for more understanding. With this, we have come to the end of another exciting video. Up next is an exercise. Hi, welcome back. So in the previous video, we got the data in our React app. In this video, we will work on the JavaScript part. We will start with the toggle interested part. That is, we will use JavaScript to change the toggle and we will use it for the filter functionality. So let me open app.js. We have coded this part earlier where we were fetching the data from getProperty by city.php. Similarly, we have created another function, toggle interested, explicitly, which will be called whenever the user will click on the heart icon. Then we are using a fetch API, but this time the URL is different, that is toggle underscore interested.php. If you remember, this file we have already created. Here we have done only one change. This is because we are doing cross-site data transfer. Let us come back to our code. Here on success, we are calling another function update interested. This is because two things are happening here. One, on clicking the heart icon, we are updating the database. And the second one is we are changing the UI, that is heart icon fill or unfill with the red color. So this toggle interested function is responsible for making an AJAX request to the toggle interested PHP file. And the update interested file is responsible for the UI change. Then we have this code that if the person is not logged in, it will show the login modal. Now in the update interested function, we are taking the state properties and are storing it in a variable update properties, which is a local variable to this function. Then we are running a for each loop to this variable in which we are taking property as a parameter to this function. This means that the loop will run that many times depending on the number of properties. Then we are matching the property.id with the property actually being clicked. Next, if the property is interested, it will make it uninterested, or if it is default, that is not interested, it will change it to interested. Then we have the code to increase or decrease the user like count. Next, in our code, we are updating the state, and the moment the state is updated, the render function automatically gets called. Next, we will call this function in the property card. Here, with each property, we are passing the toggle interested function, and along with this, we are passing property.id as a parameter. So let me quickly show you how it will be used in the property card. Here, I have taken the function and have passed it as such to the component. And in the interested.js file, I have added this function to the onClick event handler. Note that here, we do not need to pass the property underscore id again. Now let us move to the next part of the video where we will add the sorting feature using JavaScript. For sorting, we have first defined a state with a value none. This means when the data is initially fetched from the database, it is not sorted, which you can also see here. After this, we have defined a function update sort. Whenever this function is called, it will take sort as a parameter, either ascending or descending. Now based on that, we will update the state here. Note that here we are only defining the function. The actual sorting happens inside the render function. The code is simple to understand, which you can go through after this video. But note that here I have used a JavaScript function sort, which is a comparator function. As an exercise, please search online more about this function. Now that we have the code of sorting, it is time to pass it in the filter bar. So if you look here, we are passing the state of the sort to current state, and we are also passing the update sort function. Now let us proceed further and look at the state for the filter. If you look at the filter, we only have a gender filter. We could have added more filters, but to keep things simple, we have added only one filter for now. Here, also we have defined the values as none. The concept is exactly similar to sort, which we have discussed moments back in this video. So please go through the code of the app.js and filterbar.js after the video. Well, that's all in the video. See you soon. Bye bye. Welcome to the last video of this training. You have almost built the entire PG Life web application using all the web technologies that you have learned in this training. Also, I hope that you have completed the exercise which was given to you. If you have not done that, I would advise you to pause the video here and first complete the exercise, as this video is in continuation to the exercise. We will continue from the last step of the exercise where you formatted the index.html file present inside the build folder. You can see that the head part of this file is taken as such from the index.html, which is inside the public folder. Now, from the index.html, which is inside the build folder, copy the body part of the code executing the body tags, and you need to paste it inside the property underscore list.php file. Now, from this file, delete the PHP code corresponding to the property list. This means that the nav part, that is breadcrumb code, will be there, and the modal part. Also, we will not be using JavaScript anymore. It was meant for toggling because we have integrated toggle interested in the React only. After deleting the code, paste the copied part from the build index.html file here. You can ignore and delete the first two script tags from the pasted code because they are already getting included in the footer. Please note that I have already built the project, so I won't be able to make any code changes. But to help you understand, I will highlight each part of the code accordingly. So make sure that you follow the steps as shown in the video and make sure that the code is indented properly. So your property underscore list PHP code should look like this. Now if you notice, I have pasted the JavaScript code below the modal and footer code. This is because JavaScript code should be present at the end of the file. And at the end, I have included these two JavaScript files from the build index.html file. Notice carefully the path here in the index.html file. The path was static, but now I have changed it to JS. This is because when I build it, the files were present inside the React app folder, which is a standalone project. So I have to take out these files into the JS folder outside the React app folder so as to use them along with the other JavaScript files. Now, if I run the website using 127.0.0.1/pglife, you can see that this entire website is coded using React. If I open the inspect element, you can see the code here, which is exactly the way we have coded using React. So, that's all in this video and this training. Hope you had fun watching this video. Make sure you follow the steps as shown in the video and do not forget to run the application. Up next is a module test followed by the final test. Make sure you revise the concepts properly before taking the final test. All the best.